What if everything you've been told about retirement is wrong? What if waiting until 65 to finally enjoy your life is not just outdated advice, but a massive mistake? Stay tuned, because once you understand how this number came to dominate our thinking, you'll realize just how dangerous it can be to blindly follow it. The age of 65 didn't appear out of thin air. It was first popularized in the late 1800s by the German government under Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, who introduced the idea of a government pension for those aged 65 and older. But here's the catch. At the time, most people didn't even live to 65. It was a policy designed not necessarily to support the aging population, but to limit government spending. Fast forward to 1935, when the United States introduced Social Security, the age 65 standard was adopted again. It fit the times, but the world has changed dramatically since then. Back in the 1930s, the average life expectancy in the U.S. was around 61 years. So setting retirement at 65 wasn't just practical, it was almost symbolic. Few people actually reached that age, and those who did were typically not in good health. It gave a small reward to a few survivors while keeping the overall system financially viable. But today, we're living much longer, into our 70s, 80s, even 90s. The system has not kept up with that change. The number 65 is no longer connected to the realities of modern health, aging, or work. It's a leftover from a time that no longer exists. Even though we now live longer, that doesn't necessarily mean those extra years are full of health and vibrancy. In fact, many people spend their last decade or two battling chronic illnesses, fatigue, or the side effects of decades of overwork and stress. So the idea that you can work hard now, enjoy life later, starts to fall apart under the weight of modern medical and psychological realities. Waiting until 65 often means retiring into a body that's already worn down. You're no longer in your prime. You may have financial security, sure, but what about physical freedom? What about the energy to hike that trail, learn that skill, or travel across the world? Many people spend decades dreaming of retirement, only to discover that they waited too long to truly enjoy it. We've romanticized the idea of working until 65 as though it were a badge of honor. But for many, it's become a sentence of quiet desperation. Jobs have changed. They're more digital, more demanding, and more mentally exhausting than ever before. The 40 years of loyalty for a gold watch model is gone. Burnout isn't just a buzzword anymore. It's a reality for millions of people across industries. We're grinding ourselves down, using up our most energetic years so that we can finally rest at 65, when we're already depleted. It's like running a marathon only to find out the finish line is a hospital bed instead of a beach. The irony is that many people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s feel more trapped than ever, clinging to a job they hate or a career that no longer aligns with their values, just because they've been told that 65 is the magic age when everything gets better. But time isn't something you get back. Every day spent waiting is a day lost. And we're not just talking about time. It's the quality of that time that matters most. Retirement at 65 assumes that your later years will be filled with the same energy, curiosity, and physical freedom you had in your youth. But in reality, most people hit 65 with medical bills, reduced mobility, and emotional burnout. Even the financial picture has shifted. Pensions are rare. Job security is shaky. And inflation eats away at long-term savings. People are working longer not because they want to, but because they have to. The dream of a relaxing retirement is becoming less and less realistic under traditional systems. And yet, many still cling to that magic number, hoping things will somehow work out. But hoping isn't a plan. Waiting isn't a strategy. If anything, it's a risk. One that grows more dangerous the longer you delay living the life you actually want. That's why we're seeing a major shift in how younger generations view retirement. They're beginning to question the wisdom of working full-time until 65 and are exploring new models of living that prioritize freedom, fulfillment, and flexibility much earlier in life. The rise of the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early, is just one example of this growing trend. More people are choosing to simplify their lifestyles, increase their savings, build passive income, or work remotely in ways that give them control over their schedules and their lives. This doesn't mean everyone needs to retire at 40 or become a millionaire overnight. It means understanding that the old way, the 65 myth, isn't the only way. And for many, it's not even the best way. If you start asking the right questions earlier, what do I value? How much do I really need? What kind of life do I want to live? You might realize that waiting until 65 to start truly living is a tragic waste of time. People are told that if they just keep pushing through, grinding through their 30s, 40s, and 50s, they'll eventually arrive at the golden land of retirement, somewhere around 65. But what's often left out of that story is everything that gets lost along the way. Because while society talks a lot about money, pensions, and retirement accounts, it rarely talks about time, the one resource that's non-renewable, non-refundable, and often wasted in the pursuit of a financial finish line that keeps moving. The problem is, by the time many people reach that safe place at 65, they've already spent their best years in a cycle of delay, stress, and exhaustion. And the payoff? It's rarely what they imagined. One of the biggest sacrifices people make is time freedom. They trade their most flexible, energized, and vibrant years for the promise of future comfort. But this trade is based on an outdated illusion. People imagine retirement as decades of peace, hobbies, and travel. But that vision assumes you'll have the health, energy, and time to enjoy it all later. In reality, the freedom you crave in your 60s is the freedom you needed in your 30s and 40s, when your body could handle adventures, when your kids were still young, when your parents were still alive, when the world was open in a different way. Instead, most people are stuck in a loop, working full-time, barely taking vacations, missing birthdays and moments just to chase security that may never fully arrive. The paradox is cruel. You work to earn money, believing it will one day buy your freedom. But the more you work, the more you entangle your life in obligations that limit your ability to actually enjoy that freedom. Mortgages, debts, responsibilities, they don't disappear at 65. And even when retirement finally comes, it often looks more like downsizing and medical appointments than beach houses and sailing trips. People think money will solve everything, so they wait. They save, invest, and delay. But they forget. While money can be replenished, time never can. You can recover a lost investment, but not a lost decade. The real cost of waiting isn't just financial. It's emotional, relational, and spiritual. Then there's what you miss along the way. Not just opportunities, but memories. How many people put off that trip to see the Northern Lights? How many delay reconnecting with old friends or spending slow afternoons with their kids or partner? How many hobbies get shelved until I have more time? But more time rarely comes. Life speeds up. The calendar fills. Children grow up. Friends move away. Health fades. By the time the average retiree finally has the time to explore the world, they're often too tired, too busy with doctor visits, or too worn down by decades of stress and neglect. Ask anyone who's worked nonstop for 40 years. They'll tell you about the dreams they set aside, the art they never painted, the languages they never learned, the countries they never visited. Not because they didn't care, but because they always believed there would be time later. But later has a way of becoming never when you live on autopilot. When everything in your life is postponed for some mythical future, you stop experiencing the richness of the present. You stop living. You start existing. And then comes the bitter truth. By the time many people retire, they're not starting a new chapter. They're recovering from the damage of the last one. Retirement isn't a reward, it becomes rehab. Mental exhaustion, accumulated stress, and years of physical neglect often catch up right when people expect to be enjoying themselves the most. Instead of finally feeling free, many retirees feel disoriented, unhealthy, or even depressed. They find that their identity, for decades tied to their job title, is gone. Their purpose evaporates overnight. They're not stepping into joy. They're stepping into a crisis of meaning. Physically, the decline is just as real. That mountain you once dreamed of climbing? Suddenly your knees hurt too much. That plan to backpack across Asia? Now you're worried about your medications and mobility. That garden you always wanted to build? Now your back isn't cooperating. There's a cruel irony here. The very years when you finally have time to do the things you love are the same years your body starts placing limits on what's possible. The best moments to explore, learn, and play were back when you were too busy working. But no one told you that. Waiting until 65 means gambling with your health. It assumes that your physical and mental capacity will remain intact just long enough for you to enjoy your golden years. But life doesn't always cooperate. Illness doesn't wait for you to hit retirement age. Accidents don't care about your 401k. And chronic conditions built from years of desk work, poor sleep, fast food, and stress often show up just in time to ruin retirement plans. You may not feel it now, but ask anyone in their late 60s and they'll tell you. Those extra years you thought you'd have? They come at a price. Even the emotional toll of waiting too long to retire is underestimated. We're told to put our dreams on pause, but the truth is, dreams wither in storage. That business idea you had in your 30s, that novel you wanted to write, that school you wanted to open in your hometown, once you've spent 30 or 40 years under someone else's structure, with a routine built around performance and productivity, it becomes incredibly difficult to rewire your brain for freedom. Retiring at 65 may give you time on paper, but emotionally and mentally, many people feel too locked into old patterns to seize it. They don't know how to slow down, how to explore, or how to redefine success. All this paints a stark picture, not to create fear, but to create urgency. The truth is, the cost of deferring life is higher than most people realize. Every year spent waiting is a year you could have spent living more intentionally, more fully, and more freely. It's not just about ditching work forever. It's about rethinking how much of your life you're willing to trade for comfort you may never use. Retiring earlier, or at least partially unplugging from the traditional work model before 65, isn't just a luxury for the rich. It's a mindset. It's a shift from asking, "What can I afford?" to, "What am I willing to give up to live now?" It's about recognizing that the best moments of your life won't wait around for you to catch up. You can always earn more, but you'll never be 40 again. Your kids won't stay small. Your knees won't stay strong. Your curiosity won't stay sharp forever. If you let the calendar make your decisions, you may wake up one day with a full bank account and an empty memory vault. By the time many realize what they've lost, it's too late to reverse it. And all for what? A few extra years of income? A slightly bigger house? A slightly safer portfolio? Those things can be useful, yes. But are they worth trading your entire youth for? Are they worth missing weddings, sunsets, and the wild, spontaneous joy that only comes when you still feel alive? Early retirement has often been painted as a fantasy reserved for tech millionaires, celebrities, or financial geniuses. For most people, it seems like a dream completely out of reach, something so unrealistic that they don't even dare consider it. But the truth is far more hopeful. Early retirement isn't just for the wealthy. It's not even really about retirement in the traditional sense. It's about reclaiming your time, reducing your dependence on work, and choosing how to live while you're still young and healthy enough to enjoy it. For an increasing number of people, especially in younger generations, early retirement isn't about quitting life. It's about starting it sooner. The traditional model of retirement says you work for 40 years, save steadily, and then finally rest around age 65 or later. But this model was designed in a completely different era. It was built at a time when people didn't live as long, when jobs were more physically demanding, and when pensions were guaranteed. Today, that's no longer the case. The economy has changed, the job market has changed, and the entire idea of what it means to retire has shifted. That's why more people are redefining retirement, not as a single date where you stop working forever, but as a gradual shift toward freedom, autonomy, and purpose on your own terms. You don't need millions in the bank to retire early. What you need is the ability to reduce how much you rely on your job to fund your life. That means lowering your cost of living, finding alternative sources of income, and becoming intentional about your spending and priorities. It's not about being frugal for the sake of suffering. It's about aligning your lifestyle with what actually brings you meaning, instead of chasing things that keep you trapped. If your life costs less, you need less to be free, and that changes everything. Many early retirees live on surprisingly modest incomes, not because they're poor, but because they've structured their lives around values, not consumerism. They prioritize time over status. They invest in experiences rather than possessions. They downsize not because they're settling, but because they're choosing simplicity and clarity over clutter and chaos. This minimalist mindset is at the heart of early retirement. It's not about hoarding money so you can do nothing for the rest of your life. It's about needing less so you can do more of what matters now. Side hustles also play a powerful role in the early retirement journey. In the past, your main job was your only source of income. But in today's economy, it's easier than ever to build multiple income streams. Whether it's freelance writing, photography, digital products, coaching, renting out space, or selling handmade goods online, these side ventures create freedom. They allow people to leave full-time jobs earlier, not because they've made it, but because they've built just enough support to walk away from the traditional grind. It's about reducing pressure, not replacing it with a new kind of hustle. Side hustles give you control. They give you options. Then there's investing. While it's not a get-rich-quick scheme, long-term investing, especially in low-cost index funds, real estate, or dividend-producing assets, has become a cornerstone of early retirement strategies. The goal isn't to strike gold overnight. The goal is to let your money grow in the background while you focus on living intentionally. Every dollar you invest is a worker that earns for you without asking for anything in return. Over time, those small investments compound into real freedom. And it's not about being a Wall Street expert. It's about being consistent, patient, and smart with your choices. Another powerful concept driving early retirement is location independence. The internet has untethered millions of people from traditional offices. With remote work, freelancing, and online businesses, people no longer have to live in high-cost cities just to earn a living. Instead, they can move to smaller towns, quieter countries, or even travel full-time while spending a fraction of what they would in a major metro. This flexibility changes the math completely. If you can earn US dollars while living in places with a lower cost of living, your freedom accelerates. It's not about escaping reality. It's about reshaping it to fit your goals. The real shift, though, is in mindset. Younger generations aren't waiting to live. They've watched their parents and grandparents follow the rules, study hard, get a job, work for decades, retire late. And they've seen how that often ends in disappointment. They've seen people work their whole lives only to get sick, lose meaning, or miss the very moments they were saving for. So instead, they're choosing freedom in their 40s or even 30s. Not because they're lazy, but because they value time. Because they understand that money is a tool, not the destination. These early retirees aren't necessarily sitting on a beach every day. Many still work in some capacity. But the key difference is that they work on their own terms. They create. They volunteer. They build passion projects. They spend more time with family. They explore new skills. They live with purpose instead of pressure. Their lives aren't defined by weekends or vacation days, because every day is shaped by what they value, not by someone else's agenda. And perhaps the most powerful part of all this is the mental freedom it brings. When you're not constantly worried about job security, layoffs, or office politics, your entire outlook shifts. You're calmer. You're more curious. You're less reactive and more proactive. You make decisions based on long-term joy, not short-term survival. That peace of mind is worth more than any paycheck. It's what gives people the space to become better parents, better partners, and better versions of themselves. Early retirement, at its core, is about returning to yourself. Some people will say this path is unrealistic, that it's only for a lucky few. But the truth is, it's not a one-size-fits-all destination. You don't have to retire fully to benefit from this mindset. Maybe you don't leave your job entirely, but you shift to part-time. Maybe you don't move abroad, but you downsize and cut back. Maybe you can't quit tomorrow, but you start building something today. The point isn't to chase perfection. The point is to design a life where you're not constantly waiting for someday, because someday is not guaranteed. And every day spent in a job you hate, in a life that feels like a trap, is a day you'll never get back. Early retirement isn't just a financial decision. It's a rebellion against a broken system. It's a declaration that your time matters now, not just when you're 65 and exhausted. It's an invitation to design a life that fits who you are, not who society told you to be. So before you accept the 65 retirement model as your destiny, stop and ask yourself, who told you that was the right age? And more importantly, is it still right for you in this world, with your body, your dreams, and your time left? Because once you start peeling back the layers, it becomes clear. Retiring at 65 isn't a milestone. It's a mirage. And the sooner you recognize that, the sooner you can start designing a life you don't have to escape from.